So, Brain PBM, what we call Brain PBM, I mean, it's itPBM, or intranasal-transcranial photobiomodulation. So, in this context, in terms of high performance sport, I mean, I think that most of us anyway are at a certain level where we understand that the brain is really the control center, right? You've got neuromuscular activity. You've got you've obviously, I mean, you've got the connectivity within it. It's got action potential that have a strength of signal going to the musculature, and so PBM in general has been around for quite a long time. Brain PBM specifically has had definitely a bit of a boost here in the last 10 years. And just to kind of go through what that looks like. So what is PBM to begin with? PBM, before I get into this, so my name is Scott Pigeon. I'm the senior manager of business development here at Vielight. My personal background, high performance and within the neuro industry. So it's and this is a really nice blend for me personally to get into this and to hear from some of the specialists in the area. Photobiomodulation, light, bio, life, and modulation change. So we're really trying to change the physiology by applying near infrared light. So what happens, I mean, light is on a spectrum, as a lot of us know. What we specifically are going to talk about today is the near infrared light that is delivered at 810 nanometers. What happens from like high level here, again, there's some practitioners on the call that could dive into the weeds a little bit more than myself, but high level, we apply the light directly onto the scalp and through the nose, and from there the light is absorbed by the cytochrome C oxidase that is within the mitochondria, and as a lot of people know, is the kind of the powerhouse of the cell. When this happens, it boosts ATP, and which is the brain's fuel essentially. Nitric oxide is released, which is a vasodilator and improves the blood flow within the brain. And tubulins stabilize and remodel the neurons to maintain shape and form new connections. That's basically securing the framework of the cell walls themselves, and optimizing the transition of information and chemical in and out of the cell. And so it increases communication, et cetera. So this physiological change kind of leads to, this is a very upstream application. And then from there, there's a lot of positive downstream effects. I won't go into the nitty gritty. We've only got so much time for today. Of course, if you have any questions, if you're interested, then we can definitely touch base after the call or after the webinar, and we can go from there. Some quick hits in terms of what we've seen from the research. Optimized brain network communication within itself, enhancing memory and learning, elevating mood and mental balance, promoting restful sleep, especially applying like an alpha frequency just prior to bed, supporting neuroregeneration, improving circulation and neuroprotection and resilience. And finally, for me, really what we do at Vielight, again, is a bit of a dual pathway approach. So we've got the transcranial, which is on top of the head, right on the calvaria, and then up through the nasal channel, up right in through the cribriform plate, which is the thinnest part between the nasal channel and the brain itself, right, very porous, which gives a very direct application to the brain, which is great. And you have to have a really dialed in combination of proper wavelength, proper frequency, and proper irradiance. which is the power density of the light. And I mean, there's a lot of things that come into play here. If we're talking about something like inverse square law, where the further away that the application is from the target, the more refraction that's going to happen, right? So you're losing the power of the application of light, and so you're not going to really get that depth that you're looking for. So realistically, what we've done here with University of Utah and the BYU, which Larry will talk to here in a second, very, very simple in terms of protocol. A lot of people use this 3 or 4 times a week. It varies. Don't get me wrong, this varies. Everybody's brain is different. But 20 minutes a session, the actual technology that we've got turns off after 20 minutes. And you use this across, and this is not just a post-injury application. This is not just a one-off thing that you do. This is a consistent modality that you're using, and it's got a very high level of compliance, which is great, practical, measurable, and repeatable. So I just wanted to get that in terms of a general overview. And I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Larry Carr, and Larry, take it away.
Thanks, Scott. This is a introductory slide from we did a presentation at the MAHA conference a few weeks ago, and Tom Holmo is a retired BYU athletic director. He worked closely with me at BYU. Jim Herman was in the Hall of Fame at BYU, NFL lawyer. Rico was a 4-year starter at Oregon State. They've all experienced this and they all support this. Next slide. I included a couple of things at the beginning here just to kind of give you a little bit of my background. Why am I talking about this as opposed to having some expertise in it? I'm not a neurologist. I've got a PhD in physiology and exercise physiology. Early in my career, I worked with the Detroit Lions, did some things with performance training that were kind of, I don't want to say cutting edge, but it was kind of new. This was many years ago. This is, you can see the dates, 40 plus years ago. But this gives me a little bit of background. I've been around this performance industry for many, many years, and I've seen a lot of things. There's not a lot of new stuff that comes out. Next slide. This is just to show you that I'm not just talking. I did work with Detroit. Gary Wade on the right here, I worked closely with him. He was a strength and conditioning coach. He was a student of Boyd Epley at the University of Nebraska. Nebraska, as some of you may know, started the strength and conditioning formal program in 1970, and it turned their program around. So I would kind of refer to that as strength and conditioning or performance enhancement 2.0, because 1.0 is before that. When I was in college, we just were on our own. We did our own thing. Maybe you had a coach that liked it, whatever, but there was no formality to it. They just tested you and to see where you were. Next slide. This, at Detroit, I presented at a combine. Back then it was something a little different than it is now. The individual teams held regional combines. There I met a guy named John Cole, who was with the Steelers for many years. He was a all-pro, actually won the strongest man in the NFL contest. He was the 3rd or 4th strongest man in the world contest. This guy was a brute. He was the offensive guard. He was a tough guy. But anyways, I met John at Detroit, and he was interested in what I had to say. You know, there's a lot of people out there that I will talk to about this specifically or other things that don't want to hear about it. If they haven't heard about it, they just shut you down and say, it can't be valid. If I haven't heard about it, it's not a valid situation. But John listened, and he was willing to learn. And together we set up the Steelers strength and conditioning program. He retired and took over that job as well as alignment. So that's just a little bit of my background in the terms of the area of strength and conditioning, performance enhancement that I wanted to start off with. Yeah, next slide. Well, this is me way back when. You can see the big shoulder pads. It's not current, right? And 67, I don't want any comments about 67. That really was my number. Anyways, I played football at BYU. I started playing tackle football at age 10, played for many years. Was very successful at BYU. I still hold records that haven't been broken 45 years later. I didn't do that to boast, just to tell you that I was a very active linebacker. And I wasn't very big. You can see the guy in back of me, not yet. I wasn't necessarily very fast. I wasn't very tall. So I really depended on processing my brain and study and getting to know the ins and outs of the team that we were going to play, studying the game plan, knowing it backwards and forwards. I needed to be like a coach out there if I was going to be successful. Misstep here or there, a delay in processing, and it's a difference between making a tackle or getting blocked. Everybody here should realize that in competitive sports, it's a matter of milliseconds. It's a matter of a point. It's a fourth quarter, bottom of the ninth. I mean, that's what really determines a champion. Anyways, I had some real problems when I was about 60. My wife made me go to a neurologist. I was diagnosed with significant brain damage, brain injury, about 10 hours of testing. They blamed it on football. We didn't worry about concussions back then. And to be quite honest, concussions isn't the issue anymore. It's just the repetitive nature of football. And it's not even head impacts, it's body impacts. It's a change in momentum and acceleration events that we're really finding out cause the most problems. So you don't have, it's not football, it could be basketball, it could be any sports. Anyways, after BYU, I went up to Canada, played a couple of years up there, did well, came back. I needed a lot of education, so I went back to school, ended up getting a PhD in this area that I found so fascinating. It was something that I studied a great deal because of my own experience, and I knew it could make a difference in performance. Anyways, I was diagnosed. It was preceded by years of downward emotional and cognitive issues. I was distrustful. I was paranoid. People talk about suicidality. It was very near in my mind to do that. I just couldn't go through life. The guilt was just too powerful. Next slide. Anyways, we found ourselves in Boston, and I contacted Ann McKee when we were in Boston. As some of you may know, she is the eminent authority on CTE. She's taken a lot of hits, but she's also received a lot of awards and made most people aware of this disease. This cause mostly for football, but you got it in hockey and everything out there. You just heard some hockey players die of CTE or suicides. Anyways, Ann McKee, she met with us and talked to us, and I asked her for a referral. I actually begged her for a referral because I needed something. At first, she said, "There's nothing we can do. You look good, you sound good, go live your life." And my wife and I looked at each other and said, "Well, if we could do that, I wouldn't be here." So she recommended. Eventually, I came back to her, begging her for a referral. She referred me to the VA, and the VA was doing some research at the time. This was back in 2016, using light, near-infrared light, on military, and they were finding some good success. If you look underneath this, you see Ann McKee referred me directly to there, but you got to realize that most of you don't know Ann McKee. She's not one to recommend people. She just studies brains. But when push comes to shove, she recommended me to light back in 2016. She didn't recommend me to hallucinogenics. She didn't recommend me to hyperbaric oxygen. She didn't recommend me to ketamine. She didn't recommend me to anything, more drugs. She recommended, her first thing she finally recommended was light. I had not heard about it then. In all my studies, I had not heard about all the research that had been done up to that point. So I went to the VA and met with them and ended up being the first football player studied with possible CTE. The next slide. So the picture of me on the left represents me in the hospital. I went to the hospital 3 days a week. They put these giant lights on my head. I did multiple tests, scans. Before I qualified for the study, I was in bad shape. But we did that for 6 weeks. Then I had 6 weeks of follow-up with no treatment whatsoever, followed by another 2 months of a home device. This is one of the very early versions of the Vielight headset. Next slide. This is I'm going to go through this. This is the results of my first stint on the lights. This is after 6 weeks. I started in a really bad shape. My mental health started at 0. It improved down to almost, depression was almost 100% improved. Anxiety, PTSD, big improvement. Don't do it yet. That's all right. Executive function, my cognitive abilities were very low and improved greatly after 6 weeks. This is only 6 weeks. The impulsivity. This is an important test here because what it shows is that I was very impulsive. I just hit the dot, the tab, without really processing what I was doing. After 6 weeks, my processing was almost 100% accurate, and I didn't lose but a few milliseconds of time. So you can see that we'll have incredible results in this in terms of the impulsivity, and visual memory was again, big improvement. Okay, then I went off it for 6 weeks. Next slide. And you can see in almost every single measurement, I went right back to where I started. It's not a permanent change. My wife was very, very nervous, very upset about this, wondering if I was ever going to get back to where I was. I was back to normal almost, but I was really lost all the improvements that I had made. Next slide. And then you can see I went on the home device and repeated the improvements that I got through for the first. So I really made a lot of improvements with this. I was excited about it. My wife was excited about it. She said, I've got my husband back. But something else happened while I was undergoing this test. I've worked out my whole life, and I've got a degree in physiology and exercise physiology, so that's important to me. But I noticed that as I was going through this treatment, that things were happening with my workouts. I was getting better. You know, was there connection? I didn't know at the time, but I started to research that. And they had done a lot of research down in Brazil and different places with athletes and found that applying the PBM directly to muscles improved muscle performance. So after we left Boston, I came back to Utah where I met with Tom Holmo. Next slide. Who at the time he was the BYU athletic director. And Tom listened to me because I said, you know, this is back in 2018. CTE was on the news all the time. There was probably 1,000 articles in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, across the board. CTE was going to finish football. It was going to be the end of football. And so there was some interest on his part that, hey, if we could diagnose CTE in the living and they come back, you're going to have an answer for it. So he listened to me, but it took a long time for him to listen. The first response was, it's too good to be true. And I said, I know, but it is true. But he humored me. He encouraged me to, we'll keep talking. And so at the same time, next slide. By the way, Tom was athletic director of the year. He has 4 Super Bowl rings, incredible individual, administrator as well as an athlete. He's both a coach and a player. I also met Lisa Wild. She was a neuropsychologist at University of Utah, very highly published person. She had just arrived from Baylor University. I was introduced to her. She met with me, had never heard of this. This is back in 2018. But unlike a lot of people that I've talked to, she was interested. I talked to everybody I could. All I got was a pat on my shoulder. I'm glad you found something. She listened to me and she started doing her own research. And it's led to some very, very productive information. Next slide. Okay, let's get back right into the studies themselves. We've got to hurry through this to get all the information. This is a BYU football study. We had preseason evaluations. We had active and sham participants. They didn't know who was who. This is the same team. Okay, you got to realize that these guys were young, 21 years old. They went through the same preseason, the same during the season. They ate the same. They slept the same. They met the same. They trained the same. They were in all essence a perfect group to compare. Double blind. We did self-reported questionnaires. We did cognitive testing as well as emotional, depression, PTSD, did strength assessment, trying to focus on things that related to performance themselves. And we did neuroimaging. My goal here, we had done 2 studies prior to this. We had done a firefighter study. Average age was 45. We got improvements across the board in emotional, cognitive, as well as performance with firefighters. We did the same thing with ex-athletes. There was a couple of hockey players, but mostly football, soccer players across the board. Again, the same pattern of improvement, emotional improvements, cognitive improvements, performance improvements, balance, etc. So my goal here was if we can find that this is improving performance as well as doing what it did to their brains, my brains, that would be pretty impressive, a pretty good statement. Football didn't have an answer. I mean, if you look at football now, their answer is putting pads on the helmet. I mean, they already have a $1,000 helmet. What good is pads going to do? They do nothing. They don't protect the brain. The brain's in there. It's rattling around. I don't care if you put pillows on the helmet. It's not going to change the impact, the change in momentum that the brain undergoes. And we found that. We discovered that that was very much the case. So anyways, 32 members, the age, the defensive, offensive, defensive backs, offensive backfield. It was across the board. So next slide. Okay, we tested them before the season and after the season, before the bowl game. The solid lines represent the results of the neurocognitive testing, emotional testing. That's the active PBM, the solid line. The dotted line represents Sham PBM. If you look across the board, working memory, executive control, impulsivity, cognitive control, sustained attention, attention flexibility, grip strength, depression, anxiety, and stress. In every case, in every single one of these measures, the treated group did better, performed more so than the sham group. Now, if you look at these things are performance-related measures. The grip strength. Football players do not keep their strength from beginning to the end of the season. They just don't. They have a very detailed strength and conditioning program that tries to maintain it. You can see that the sham group decreased their strength while the treated group increased their strength. You had a stronger football player at the end of the season than at the beginning. Their emotional measurements, anxiety, depression, and stress were improved over the sham group. The memory, executive control, impulsivity. Impulsivity was huge. I mean, this is a difference of being successful in the fourth quarter. This is a game changer right here. When you look at changing with wins and losses, that 3% rule, this is a better football player. This is a better student. This is a better preparation for the football game. We were excited when we saw this. We didn't expect it. The researchers were shocked, quite frankly, when they saw this. These are 21-year-olds. How can wearing a headset 3 days a week cause this kind of a change? There's a lot of people that don't believe it, but these researchers, all of this has been published. You can look it up. All of our research has been published. We have 28 presentations and peer-reviewed publications and presentations with this work in just the last 5 years. Been very productive. I don't have anything to gain. I didn't have anything to do with testing these people or analyzing the data. I'm totally unbiased. We were shocked at this age of a student had this much of a change in only 1 month, only a couple months. Next slide. Okay, so what we wanted to do next is take a look at the difference or the change in the brain. What happened in the brain as opposed to just these tests? Was there a relationship between changes in the brain and those tests? On the left-hand side, you can see this is a sham. This is from the sham brain. It's a measurement of inflammation. You can see that the inflammation in the sham group was inundated. The brain, all across the entire brain, was full of inflammation. Now, this isn't a leftover from previous times. This is the change from pre to post. So there's no leftover. On the right-hand side, you can't really even hardly see it because the athlete, this is the active PBM treatment, have no markers of increased inflammation, indicating the resilience to the effects of injury. This is huge. I don't know what you guys, this is the first time this has been reported. We just published this in the Journal of Neurotrauma. It's getting a lot of attention, but I'll tell you, this is huge. This is a DTI scan. I'm not an expert. Don't go back yet. Go back. I'm not an expert when it comes to this. One of our team members, Hannah, is an expert. In fact, the results were so compelling that they brought in a couple of physicists and other experts in MRI because they just didn't believe it. It took a year of analyzing this before they felt comfortable in reporting this and letting it out to the public. But this is a game changer. You know, nobody's ever reported this. If you can decrease inflammation, we have other slides that talked about, compared the axon injuries, and there was no initiation of the axon injury response in the treated group as opposed to the sham group. So we were really excited about this. Once again, these neuropsychologists have a combination of probably 400 publications, 25 years each in the field. They had never seen anything like this. It's impressive. Okay, the next slide. Okay, this is a head-to-head comparison of one athlete with a sham device and one athlete with an active device. You can see that on the left-hand side, they've got about as much inflammation as that brain can handle. On the right-hand side, they have virtually no inflammation. In fact, they had a net loss of inflammation. From out of Boston, the research suggests that years of playing football are additive, that the more years you play, the greater risk you have of developing a disease, certainly symptoms of the disease. But you can see that the difference between these two people, only 3 days a week over the course of 16 weeks, I mean, just ask yourself, who would you rather have on your team? If your son was playing, what brain would you rather your son be? And then you can look at the testing, the grip strength, the sustained attention, the mental speed, the reaction time, the cognitive control. Every one of those improved on the active PBM as opposed to the sham. I mean, once again, this is a performance-based treatment. It is a health-based treatment. These guys have a healthier brain at the end of the season than they did at the start of the season. I don't say that lightly. One of our researchers said, and this is after 7 studies, looking back over the 7 years, we've had 7 studies. Every single study showed the same pattern of improvement. The one researcher said it sweeps the brain. I mean, there's nothing out there that says it sweeps the brain. It's not like taking a supplement that you hope gets digested and through the blood-brain barrier. This is a direct application of light to the brain, and it's effective. Why anybody wouldn't use this, and I'm not an owner in Vielight. I don't get money for the sales of the devices. I don't have stock in the company. But when I went down that rabbit hole, and I don't wish that upon anybody. And this thing is works. I've taken care of myself. I exercise, I eat right, I sleep, I took medication. Nothing helped. This helped, and you can see the results of a young athlete as we look at this. Next slide. Is that it?
No,
Here we
you
go.
can, yeah.
Here we go. Here, I just wanted to go over something real quick. In terms of all our studies, we found the inflammation resilience is from this device. We found that it has protection in the white matter. It showed strongest protective effects on areas most vulnerable to impacts. We found the middle part of the brain that gets bound around and twisted and torsion. We found that was the source of a lot of the inflammation. We saw cognitive and motor gains, and we sham group declined in a lot of areas of health. I referenced Nebraska earlier. Nebraska implemented a strength and conditioning coach and a formal program in 1970. Prior to that, in 50s, 60s, they had about a 55% win-loss record. After that, they jumped up to 81, 82, and 83% for the next 20 years, 20, 30 years. Now let's look at BYU. They used this light as part of their 21 season, was what we did the research, the 24 season and 25 season. They didn't use it in 22 and 23. We were taking a lot of time getting the results to them. And it's something new. You know, people don't want to accept that. Well, you can look at that and see their win-loss record for the 22 and 23 season was only 52%. The win-loss record for the 6 years total, this is the same head coach, was 56%. The win-loss record with the 21, 24, and 25, when they used the light, jumped up to 83%. Now, I know it's anecdotal. Don't hit me with research and what you can't tell. It's coincidental. I know, right? But I'll tell you, there's a pattern here. And the pattern is that BYU had I think they had 2 draft picks in total those 3 seasons. They had no 5-star. I don't even know if they had a 4-star. I think they had a couple of 4-star recruits, athletes. Yet they had the same record during those 3 years as the top. They were one of the top 4 in the nation as far as win-loss. They're part of the Big 12 conference. It's a tough conference. You can say what you want, but let's put it this way. Using the headsets is not going to decrease your performance or your win-loss. It's going to increase it because across the board, it looks like everybody's using it. Not only do you have a healthier brain, but you've got better performance measurements. And that, I believe, I'm speaking to myself as someone who played a lot, someone who studied a lot, makes a difference. Next slide. One time I was meeting with Tom. He was very reluctant. He told me that this is the first time he's ever funded a study for the school. He gets hundreds of vendors coming to him saying that this is a difference maker. This is a difference maker. You got to try this. This study was the only one that they've ever sponsored. And after we were going through the results one day, and he said I could use this quote, he's looked at me and he said, you know what? We could change the game. We could change the game. There's not many people that get a chance to change the game. And you know, when you look at this in terms of preparing your athletes, sending these kids out, I had a hard time. I love the game of football. But when the game of football was slowly killing me, I had a real struggle with that. Football I came from a very abusive family. It was a tough road. It gave me confidence. It gave me some attention. It gave me some success. I love the game. But when that game was slowly killing me, I had to step away. And I really had to question whether I wanted to play this or not. Now you don't have to worry about that. As a coach, you don't have to turn your head and look the other way and hope that everything is okay, because it's not. Without this, you're putting your athletes in danger. And we found different markers in the brain that suggest that even women's soccer players, 21-year-old, had multiple indicators of risk factors of CTE, as did every one of the football players. So they might be acting healthy, but I put my name behind this. Okay, next slide. These are the three main people in our researchers, excellent scientists, incredible productivity, volunteered hundreds of hours to get this thing done. And quite frankly, Lisa, Dr. Wild, looked me in the eye early on and said, and I asked her, why are you interested in doing this? Why are you giving your time to this? And she looked me in the eye and she said, you know, I've been doing this a long time. We're very good at diagnosing. We're very good at telling people what's wrong, but we have nothing to offer them. Now, obviously, they can treat the symptoms through drugs, but as far as helping them, curing them, healing them, they have nothing. And so they were really excited to do this, and they've done this. They've been into this full time for the last 7 years. They're busting their rear ends getting this data out. Next slide.
And Larry, just for time's sake, we'll wrap up with a little bit, and we'll move on to Mark. Is there any last impacting?
You have one more slide, real quick. I won't even talk about it.
Yep.
Okay, this is just the productivity of our team. We don't say anything without it being published or peer reviewed. Everything I've said has been published and peer reviewed. You can take it to the bank. Thank you.
Appreciate your time, Larry. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Mark Fitzgerald out of Kelowna. And Mark, why don't you quickly introduce yourself, and we'll kind of go through the approach that you're taking.
Thanks, Scott. Just want to say first, Larry, thank you so much for sharing all that. I know we've been speaking a little bit, but that was it was cool to kind of get the behind the scenes. So thank you very much. That's super exciting based on what we're getting into right this second. So thanks again for sharing all that and sharing that experience. I'm going to speak a little bit more about just kind of being a strength and conditioning coach that Larry spoke about, just my kind of role within, I'll say concussion management, but as Larry mentioned as well, it's more just about the trauma, head trauma, and it comes in multiple ways. So I'm going to speak to a little bit of that. I'm a performance coach, strength coach, whatever you want to call me. I've been working in high level sport. There's a lot of logos there. I spent a lot of time in the NHL, about 15 years, with a couple of different organizations, consulting with different whether it's Hockey Canada or the private academies. A lot of my time is spent in hockey. I was a football player myself, not at any professional level, just in college. I also have spent time with some different sports, lacrosse, rugby, international rugby. So I am going to speak mostly to hockey, but just with the understanding that, as Larry mentioned, it goes across multiple sports. I've dealt with young female athletes who are soccer players who are, struggling with head injuries of some kind. And then, yes, hockey, obviously, where I started in, for the most part, a lot of different mechanisms throughout the years. And I'm just going to touch a little bit about that and my kind of journey through that and kind of where it sits today, and with the introduction of Vielight and really excited about what those next steps could look like. Similar to Larry, I played football. I played in college in Canada, and my first year in school was '98, and concussions wasn't really a top of mind thing for athletes at that time, or it wasn't something that was just talked about a whole lot. And I feel like it kind of, for me personally, I knew I had a couple coming out of high school that weren't diagnosed necessarily, but I had the symptoms of it looking back. At the time, I didn't realize. And while in university, I got a couple really good ones that were diagnosed. And by really good, I mean severity-wise, vomit inducing, kind of out of commission for a couple months. My last one being probably the most severe. And then, when you start to look back on it and, looking at Larry's presentation there about the I suffered with some depression right after university when I was done playing football, and I never really connected those dots. And, starting the introduction with Scott at Vielight and starting to talk about all these things. And to be honest, I thought there was not really an answer, and I wasn't a big advocate of, medications and, different drugs that are going to make me feel a certain way or some false sense of happiness. That wasn't something for me that was really an option. Now, to each their own. I'm not going to, I know those things are valuable, but for me, it was more, I wanted to try to find a different way to come out of this. And, so I've tried many different things, custom blood work and supplementation, and for myself personally, to try to mitigate some of the symptoms that still linger to this day. Getting my start in working with young athletes, you start to see, how misunderstood a head injury is, or the incidence of a head injury. And I think at the time, when the concussion was a hot button issue, CTE, I was in the NHL at the time. It was, as Larry said, that thousands of articles and people almost proclaiming X, Y, and Z, and it was very noisy. And even when you look into youth sport at that time, every kid on every team and every sport had concussions, and I think it was very misunderstood. So it was a lot of area of misunderstanding. And I think for me, that was always, I try to live by that. There are no absolutes. I try to never say never, because it's just so individualized, and the symptoms are so individualized. As you move on here, Scott, with the slide, when we started with with my first NHL organization, our answer to a head injury, or what we thought to be a concussion, was, okay, that athlete no longer does anything. Like, they are shut down. They are locked in a dark room. And we had an incident where we had an athlete who was one of our better producing players. He was a leader on our team, and this is at the professional level. And he, for months, it wasn't getting any better. And every day it was, hey, how you feeling? Hey, how you doing? Until the point that he couldn't handle that anymore either, because he didn't know how to feel. He didn't remember what good felt like, and that was a big one for us. And we had a great staff and team doctors that were, I would say, pushing the limits in terms of what we should be doing, and how it evolved. For us, was we started to realize that we can't just wait for these athletes to get back to better, because that's not going to help. We have to help them with some different modalities. And for us, it was, it was active recovery. It was trying to raise the heart rate in a way that, didn't, it added stress, but not too much. And I think for me, that was a big learning curve, just in terms of how to manage an injury like that, because there was so much unknown. We found that there was, you had to be integrative through all the different types of people that we had access to, whether that's manual therapy, sports psychology. At the time, we had a great sports psychologist who really helped us kind of bring all those pieces together. I thought, on my end, it's, how can I help them with, muscles that feed into the neck with their traps, and that what anxiety kind of sometimes does to an athlete, where, they're short of breath, or they feel that they can't exert themselves. So we started to build out that protocol, that return to play protocol, with, looking at moderate activity. How do we introduce moderate activity? How do we monitor heart rate to make sure that we, are stressing a little bit and making them feel like athletes again? I think that was the thing that for me was huge. And, you fast forward to now, a big part of it is, how do we get them to that level of activity and blood flow, and how do we get them feeling like themselves again? And the experience that I've had with athletes, especially in the last probably 3 to 5 years, is that has shown, again, not on the research side, but in the practical application side, of being a huge factor to them getting back to, full health, is that slow integration of activity and constant monitoring and what have you. And what we're now including, because of the connection with Vielight, and I don't have stock in the company either, and it's just, you know, I think part of my job is to look for tools that are going to help support my athletes, and you know, finding this as a tool that is something they can do at home, something that is you know, kind of set in stone in terms of the 20 minutes. There's not a whole lot of extra work that they have to do, which for me is a big bonus as well. If it's easy, it's a lot more, the uptake is a lot higher. Scott, if you can move on there. Yeah, again, I kind of covered this already, like just the performance team that we had, you know, how each person played a role in that recovery of that athlete. And I think that's, you know, it's crucial to have those different inputs. You know, before a product like Vielight, it was supplementation. You know, we looked into some fish oil supplementation. Creatine at the time was early on in the research around like the potential benefits of creatine supplementation post injury. So we were really pushing. We had a great naturopathic doctor that worked with our team doctors as well. Again, super lucky at the time to be in an organization that, you know, wanted to push and wanted to be better. So that was crucial for my experience. We can move on to the next one there, Scott. You know, and again, I think today it's incredibly, you know, you'd think it would get a little less complicated, but as you know, as Larry was saying, it can get more complicated because all these different sports, and you can get into the discussion around, you know, the young athletes now who are treated like little pro athletes, where they don't take time off their sport. They don't play multiple sports as much as they used to, which is a whole other webinar. But I think that's, in my opinion, that could feed negatively into the amount of these you know, events that the kids are exposed to, right? If they're not taking time off, if they're not learning the different skills from other sports, you know, is that affecting their ability to recover from these events? You know, and I think that's a topic that definitely needs to be pushed into. I had a young hockey player who, again, was trying to come back from a concussion, and we figured out it was more of a visual issue. You know, he stopped wearing his glasses. You know, so I had a really good optometrist here locally who is, you know, on the cutting edge of that type of recovery, and it was a simple, you know, change of prescription and giving him new glasses. You know, so again, always trying to find tools, and that's why I'm so excited to get into this. And obviously with the success of the Utah study, you know, we're looking to put together a study of our own and really see if we can make some change with not only current athletes, but eventually looking at our retired athletes, because there's so many of those that I get to still work with who are, you know, done with their career, and, you know, they struggle. And as Larry said, you know, it's hard to see those guys go through that because they've lost their level of activity, they've lost their regularity of routine, and, you know, they're trying to get back into it. And you know, a lot of the guys here, they have kids now and they're chasing the kids around, and, you know, it really is challenging, especially for the retired players as well. So super excited to kind of keep building that with not only current but the retired players. As we move forward there, you know, I think this is where we get into the different aspects of what people are doing, and kind of the rabbit hole that you can go down. And I think for me, finding a tool that has the research behind it that is easy to use is, again, something I'm super excited about, and trying to find things that are don't cost the athlete much in terms of timing and what have you, right? It's more about building into their daily routine and habits, and having them track those activities. We use, you know, daily questionnaires. We use you know, we'll use with our study a myriad of assessments to really pinpoint, you know, what we can speak to in terms of recovery, and how we can, you know, into the future build out more of these studies so that we can, as Larry said, prove that this thing is that beneficial going forward. And then the last one, you know, objective measurement. You know, how do we make sure that we get in front of this early? You know, how do we continue to talk? And, you know, I'm with you, Larry. The the extra pillows on top of the helmets isn't the answer. You know, it really isn't. What the answer is awareness around the different tools that are available and the tools that help us actually make progress. And I think that to me is why that BYU study is so fascinating. And, you know, when you look at, even for myself personally, I just started with my device, and I'm, you know, watching your story, listening to your story. I'm really keen on seeing the results for myself, selfishly, and super excited to see how I can, you know, help some of these athletes as they come through my doors and looking for answers. And, you know, the whole, you know, lifting weights and getting better at their sport, like that's the easy part. This is the stuff that is really, you know, the trickier side of it. And because there's so much nuance with each individual. So,
Yeah. And just for clarity, Mark's been gracious enough to have, we're doing a 40 NHL player study in Kelowna, 20 active, 20 sham. So that's the study he's referring to.
Yep. And I think that's maybe, is there one more slide there? Yeah. It probably just goes back to what, talking about the whole piece of it is the recovery part of it requires a team. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers as a performance coach, strength coach. I'm super fortunate to have chiropractors, physios, you know, researchers. We have our head of sports science here in Kelowna's in his third year of his PhD, and he's, you know, pushing us to, you know, challenge our assumptions daily. And I think having that team around us that helps with, you know, and I feel like Vielight will be a part of that team now as well, and really pushing the boundaries of beyond the, you know, performance training and training for the sport. Because I think that's part of my job. Part of my job is to help the athlete, you know, through their sport life, and then, you know, assist them into their after sport life, and make sure they have, you know, healthy, or support them in their healthy relationships with their family and their health, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel a pretty big responsibility for that. And I think obviously technology is a big part of that. So yes, thank you again. Really appreciate it. Excited to learn more from everybody.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mark. We'll speed it along here, Gil. Sorry, we've gone a bit over, but we really appreciate you coming in from DSI Performance in Miami. And why don't you speak to who you are and how you're using Vielight?
My name is Gil Gonzalez. I'm the principal of DSI Performance Lab, and I've been delivering mental, visual, cognitive, motor skills training for improved athletic performance for the last 20 years. And I've been working with athletes at all levels, all sports, from elite professional level, you know, Olympians, college, high school, and little leaguers. And in the good old days, in the beginning, you know, there wasn't all the technology that there is now. But, you know, with knowledge and finding the right talent, you know, like Jorge Masvidal in 2006, we started doing some mental training, vision training, and taking the street fighting into the highest levels of UFC. At the time, you know, the company that was more solid, I say, in terms of instruments and devices was Wayne Industry, Wayne Engineering. And I used the Wayne Saccadic fixator, the 1976 device that was used on Miracle on Ice by the United States team. So next slide, please. And I'm going to try to go as fast as possible.
Sorry, Gil.
Because of time. And, you know, my philosophy, my way of understanding high performance is that there is always a gap between lab training. You know, there's a lot of knowledge out there that's not integrated. And that's what we do best at DSI. We integrate technologies, we integrate experiences from other people. And along the way is where we find I think the most effective ways to train the athletes. And I'm not gonna say much about, you know, myself, but I can tell you through the years, I've been lucky to develop or to work with people who went to the highest levels of their sport. Next slide, please. We educate the players, we give them the knowledge, we give them the experience, but when we mentor everybody to be the best they can be. And this is why you are looking always, for technology, the latest that we can find. And when it comes to helmets, to headsets, there's so many types in the market. I was looking for that for years until I was put in contact with the Vielight. Next slide, please. And just, another note, I don't deal just with sports. I also help people, highly functional autistic, ADD individuals, and I work with an elderly population trying to preserve the essential mental skills. And that's another thing, to prevent diseases like dementia. Next slide, please. And there's a list here of some of the athletes that I work. This is a very partial list, but some of them, Major League ball players that became the best and have been managers in Major League Baseball. Some Olympians that went into winning gold medal and then becoming professional. So my experience has been fantastic. I would never trade what I do for anything else. Next slide, please. And in June 2023, I started using with Ilia Topuria, which at the time it was not a champion. It was a very interesting individual with a lot of potential. And I started using the MIP for his fight in 2023 against Josh Emmett. Fantastic, because it helped us, to minimize the negative effect of weight cut. The energy was there. He was sleeping better with just the use of the MIP. After that, it came the beginning of 2024 when he had to fight for the title in Las Vegas. And then we incorporated another Vielight instrument. At the time, it was the Neuro Duo 3 for like 6 weeks. And then the Neuro Duo 4 came into the market. And Ilia used both instruments, both devices for this fight. And he won the title. Since then, he's been the most successful fighter that there is in UFC, and he continues to use the devices from Vielight. Now he's using the Neuro Pro 2. So when you educate an athlete and he sees the success that can be brought by education, mental training, and all that, but the technology, the right technology, is going to be loyal to you. So I think that Ilia is going to continue using the technology from Vielight. At the same time, Angelica Delgado is a 3 times Olympian judo fighter. I've been training her for about 12 years. After she failed the Olympics in 2012, I started training her. And I introduced to Angelica Vielight, and we started using it like almost 2 years ago. And initially it was just the MIP, then we started using the Neuro Duo and the Vegas. All those devices combined helped her to minimize, the effects of weight cut, traveling extended hours, and recovering faster, sleeping better, to the point that she made it to the 3rd Olympic in a row. So we changed, the careers of people when you have the right approach and the right technology behind it. And right now I'm working closely to 2 tremendous prospects from the Washington Nationals. 2 pitchers are using the Neuro Duo Pro, using the Vegas, and the catcher of the Houston Astros, Yainer Diaz, is doing the same. And these people are very, very disciplined. We work together, and they tell me, they report how good they feel with the use of the technology. Next slide, please. So one new thing that we did this high school season in Miami is to introduce more of the Vielight technology. Aside from the individuals that come and work at the lab with all the technology that I have, I started assigning MIP units to some of the best players, because you know what, they have very, very extenuating circumstances. You know, they go to the same schools, they don't sleep better. The schools are very hard, and sometimes they play 3 games in 1 week. And a lot of them, the rest period is short. They don't eat well. And, you know, I started using the MIP with them to recover, to give them the energy, and it made the difference too. So we were successful with that because we have in one team, from 6 home runs in 1 year in that team, where we had 7 of those players under our care, our training, they went to 27 home runs. We have people who are committed in the junior year to University of Miami, universities in Texas. So we're having a lot of success. I'm gonna tell you, right now, I'm working 65 hours a week in all our private sessions. And we keep receiving more and more athletes called from all over the world. You know, yesterday it was from Brazil, asking me about the technology that we're using, because, you know, there has been a lot of information about Ilia, and I'm in some of those videos because they published some of the films that we did when he was training at my lab. So I think that there's a big future for Vielight. From my point of view, Vielight has this potential to be huge in performance and recovery, not just as a medical instrument, but in sports in general, because, you know, Major League Baseball, for instance, 162 games, and 81 of those games you're traveling through different zones. And as Angelica reported, and Ilia reported to me, the use of the Vielight technology minimizes the effect of the jet lag. And so I think that there is, for me, it's evident that the usage of technology of Vielight is necessary, not just when the player is ill, you know, not just to treat them from the medical standpoint, but to improve their performance. And I have documented, you know, some of the success that we have with it. But if anybody wants to find out more, I have my Instagram, and you can see some of the players, some of the athletes that I work with using the technology. Okay.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Gil. I really appreciate that. Yeah, so to digress here, I think that the big takeaway is that this isn't just a recovery tool. This isn't just a performance tool. It's more of a daily. I mean, you can use it in a silo if you really need to, right? You can use it for solely recovery if that's the goal. You can use it for performance if that's just the goal. It's got a very unique marrying of the two, is that if you at a physiological level, getting back to a state of homeostasis and optimizing the brain from there, that is really what's enhancing performance or just daily function, right? And so, we talk about the kind of wear and tear through football. Larry, you put it really well that, it's not always just the big concussive events, right? It's the continuous wear and tear. And that goes across all sports in general. I mean, again, soccer, you've got head hits, but at the same time, it's a change in direction, which is effectively, having the brain just get rattled around a bit, creating neuroinflammation, et cetera. And that's really what Brain PBM is doing, itPBM through Vielight specifically. We're really trying to manage, whether it's the inflammation, whether it's the connectivity, and if we're hitting it at a physiological level, if the issue, if there's cognitive issues, if there are behavioral issues, right? I mean, there's so many different issues that can performance issues, of course. But if you hit it at a physiological level, everything below that is affected, right? And that's really what we're looking to do here is supply the brain with enough energy to be able to go do all the brain cells jobs more effectively. We mentioned research. I mean, Vielight is, we were born in research, right? We're not a marketing company that has, has really great marketing, and now we have to try to backpedal and try to get some research and try to get some studies done. We're heavily more of a research company that are doing our best to really try to just get the message out there, let people know that this technology exists, hopefully change a lot of lives along the way. So by all means, there's some QR codes. You can also just go to our research page where we have all of the different research there. Bottom line, recovery, repair, optimization, performance, everything starts in the brain. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish here is treat the source, and everything else will fall in line. And yeah, your brain's your most valuable asset. Let's keep it that way. So thank you so much, everybody. We still have a decent amount of people here, which is great. I'm going to stop sharing for right now, and I'm going to just check out if there are any new posts here. Really quick Q&A here. I've answered a few of them as the conversation has gone on. Typical session look like it's athlete dependent, right? I mean, it's what we've seen, of course, is 3 to 4 times a week in terms of 20-minute applications each time. That is a generic answer. Every athlete's different. Every condition is different. Please reach out to us directly, and we can help you, help guide you to what an ideal protocol looks like, and go from there. In terms of the how does photobiomodulation fit into existing training and recovery regimen? Again, athlete dependent. It depends on if the issue is sleep. If the issue is we're seeing some studies now, or even just applications in general for a gamma application immediately before some kind of physical performance objective. So we're seeing positive results there. So every application is a little bit different. We've got different wavelengths, and we've got different frequencies. Each of those vary in terms of the application purpose, right? So I think that to not to dodge the question, but again, some of these are they're so specific that the athlete, the person, every brain is different. Their ability to their brain's ability to kind of be under that light for a certain amount of time. Maybe somebody is going to start with a 2 minutes of application, and then they say, you know what, that's enough for me for now, and we'll go from there, and maybe the next time is 5 minutes, the next time is 10 minutes, etc. I just seen one popped up. Are there different models? Yes. We've got, it ranges from, I know that Gil was mentioning the MIP, which is just the intranasal. Then you can move on to, we've got ones that are transcranial and intranasal, which are just an alpha setting, which is 10 hertz. We've got one that is just the gamma setting, 40 hertz. Traditionally, and we're doing more research as we go on here, but traditionally, your brain, it kind of goes through a bit of a bell curve throughout the day, right? You're starting at a lower hertz, you're kind of gradually ramping up. So whether you're starting in alpha, right, maybe somewhere around there when you're kind of waking up, you're ramping up gradually into gamma, and then you'll come right back down into that, and so you can use the gamma to start the day off. You can use the alpha when to kind of gear down. We're seeing advances where we say, maybe use alpha first to prime the brain and then hit it with gamma to increase the efficacy of the application. So, there's so much kind of exciting stuff going on that that we're really looking forward to seeing the specific applications and go from there. Sorry, don't mind me. I'm bouncing around here in terms of I love the questions. This is great. NeuroPro 2 questions. NeuroPro 2 is so customized and is so advanced in terms, it's got a frequency, which is the hertz, that can go from 0 to 9,999. Again, everybody's brain is different. We would recommend for something like that you can get an EEG done, you can send that in. From there, we can literally tailor that application to you specifically. And the NeuroPro is what we would do that with. Let me see here. To what extent does hair reduce the amount of light that penetrates the skull? Good question. So I mentioned before in like an inverse square law, if you will, right? So if you've got a ton of hair, right, the beauty of the Vielight device itself is that, if you put kind of a helmet on, that helmet is going to be kind of just lifted up above the scalp, right? The idea is to get it as close to the scalp as you possibly can. That way you're not getting, too much refraction. You're getting the direct penetration with the least amount of space between the light and the scalp itself, to be able to immediately hit scalp, pass through the calf area, and with proper irradiance, etc., and obviously penetrate brain tissue. So that's a good question in terms of the hair. Hair itself, that's a loose. It's a kind of a loose question in terms of thick hair. Yes, even pigment. Yes, would change it. But the beauty of Vielight is that we have those diodes as close to the scalp as possible, which is going to increase your efficacy ultimately. We're going to do one. I know we've gone over, and I apologize, but I think that there's been some really great input, from Larry and Mark and Gil. I didn't want to cut anybody off too much. I knew that some people only had an hour to kind of build in there with their busy schedules, especially on a Friday, and they're going from there. In terms of leg joint conditions, Vielight is specifically designed to penetrate the skull. Right, that is what we do. There are lots of PBM, whether it's devices, panels, etc., out there that are designed for more superficial applications. Brain. The hair, the scalp, the skull, and to be able to reach brain tissue, right? And nature has done a great job at ensuring that the brain is protected from things like UV and other radiations and frequencies and wavelengths, etc. But so I just wanted to call that out, that if you're looking to put a Vielight device on something like a joint, it is not designed specifically for that, although there are things out there. In terms of any other questions, protocols to use at home, again, please call in to Vielight. Specifically, just go to vielight.com. If you have any other questions, sport related, then again, we've got a sport page. You can put in a request form, and it's most likely going to be myself from a sports perspective reaching back out to you, and we can go from there. If a practitioner base, no different. We will have somebody reach out to you that can speak to your question. But I really want to thank everybody for joining. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. I know that I would love to answer as many questions as I can, and hopefully we can answer everybody's questions if you do reach out directly to Vielight, and we can go from there. So Larry, Mark, Gil, really appreciate your input, and you know, hope everybody, regardless of your usage, I hope everybody can use this information, and everybody increases their quality of life. I think that's what we're all here for. So thank you so much, and have a lovely Friday, maybe Saturday if you're across the pond, and hopefully we'll talk to you very soon. Thank you. Take care, guys.